A woman called me from the checkout lane of a grocery store on West Madison and asked, very calmly, why there was a frozen pizza in her purse, and why her 4-year-old son was standing beside a stranger near the automatic doors. She was not crying yet. That came later. At first, she sounded embarrassed, the way people sound when they think they made a dumb mistake in public and want the room to stop looking at them. She had gone into the store for diapers, she said. Then she blinked and found herself holding a receipt for canned soup, batteries, and a bottle of mouthwash. The cashier kept asking her to move because the line was backing up. The little boy kept saying, "Mom, you already paid," and the woman could not remember leaving her apartment. I was alone in a rented broadcast room above a copy shop near Printers Row, with 2 cameras, a laptop, a cheap audio board, and a notebook full of names that were usually more useful than the gear. The room had no glamour. It had gray foam panels peeling near the ceiling, a window that showed the brick wall of the next building, and a narrow desk that shook whenever the building's freight elevator ran. I used it for a local news stream because nobody else wanted to pay me full-time, and I had gotten tired of writing free copy for outlets that called exposure a career step. I covered fires, school board fights, union rallies, police briefings, restaurant closures, and the small disasters that become big disasters when nobody records the first hour cleanly. The woman on West Madison became the first clip I saved that morning, but not the first report I heard. 10 minutes earlier, a tow truck driver had sent me video from Ashland Avenue showing 3 cars stopped in the middle of the intersection with their hazard lights on. No crash, no road rage, no police. Drivers sitting still, hands on the wheel, staring forward while traffic stacked behind them. A man in a delivery van got out and asked where he was. A cyclist shouted at him. The driver walked around the van, checked the side panel for the company name, and then looked at the street signs because he could not remember his route. That could have been anything. A bad drug batch. Carbon monoxide in an underground garage. A panic trend online. People lie. People copy behavior. People film half of an event and sell the missing half as mystery. I had learned to distrust the first version of every story, especially when it came with shaky video and a caption written by somebody who wanted shares. I marked the grocery call at 8:27 in the morning. I marked the Ashland video at 8:17. I wrote down wind from the west, normal traffic, no major weather alerts, no gas leak bulletin, no fire department cluster on the scanner feeds I was monitoring. Then I asked both people the same question. What did you hear right before it happened? The grocery caller did not answer right away. She put the phone down for a moment, or maybe she lowered it. I heard the dull noise of carts, plastic bags, somebody complaining about coupons, a child breathing hard through his nose. When she came back, her voice had changed. She said there was a tone through the store speakers before she lost the time. She had noticed it because it cut off the music. One clean beep, maybe less than a second. Then a softer tone under it, low enough that she felt it more than heard it. She did not know how long it lasted. She remembered reaching for diapers. Then she was at the register with soup in a bag. The tow truck driver said the same thing without knowing what the woman had told me. He said every stopped driver had a phone mounted on the dash or plugged into the console. He had heard the warning sound from 2 cars at once while he was hooking a parked sedan for a private lot. He thought it was a weather alert. He said it was not the normal emergency alert sound. Not exactly. It began with a sharp chirp and then a flat tone that made his teeth feel strange. His words, not mine. I wrote them down exactly. I asked if he had lost time. He said no, but he had been wearing hearing protection because he had been using an impact wrench. That was the first clean difference. The people who heard it without protection lost time. The guy in ear protection remembered the tone and remembered everyone else freezing. That did not prove causation. It proved I had one detail worth chasing. I went live at 8:41 with nothing dramatic in the title. Minor memory loss reports under review. That was all. I did not say virus. I did not say attack. I did not say outbreak. Viewers punish caution during normal weeks, then beg for it during real emergencies. I told people I had received several reports of sudden disorientation across the city and asked anyone with video timestamps, or written notes to send them. I told people not to drive if they felt confused. I told them to write their name, address, current location, and destination on paper, and keep it in a pocket. I repeated the boring part twice because boring instructions save people better than thrilling guesses. The first flood of messages was junk. People claiming the government had turned on a machine under O'Hare. People blaming the lake. People saying it was punishment. People pretending they were witnesses because they wanted their handle read on air. But mixed into that mess were 6 reports I could not dismiss. A nurse at Northwestern Memorial said a patient had asked for her morning medication 3 times in 9 minutes and then accused staff of withholding it. A barista in Logan Square said 5 customers received a phone alert at once and 2 forgot their coffee orders mid-sentence. A woman near Roosevelt Road said her smart speaker made a tone, and then her father walked into the hallway without pants, holding his car keys, convinced he was late for work even though he had retired 4 years earlier. I called the nurse first because medical staff have less patience for nonsense. She would not give her full name, which was fair. She said the problem was not normal confusion. It was selective. Patients could speak, read, move, recognize faces, and answer questions about their childhood, but they lost recent intention. They forgot why they entered the room. They forgot what had been explained moments earlier. One man remembered his daughter's phone number, but not the fact that he had called her 5 times in the last half hour. The nurse said the hospital was already seeing small errors multiply. During medication checks repeated. Consent forms signed twice. Visitors giving patient histories that patients immediately contradicted. Nobody knew whether the contradictions were lies, panic, or actual memory failure. Boy. She stopped talking for a few seconds, then asked me if we had already done this interview. I checked the recording clock. We were 4 minutes in. I told her no. She apologized and said she heard the hospital public address system tone 5 minutes before she called me. She had thought it was a security announcement. She did not remember the announcement after the tone. She had written "Blue Hallway, Do Not Trust Verbal Recall" on her glove in black marker. She did not remember writing it. I asked her to take a photo of the glove. She sent it. The writing was shaky but readable. By 9:15, I had a map open across one monitor and a spreadsheet across the other. I logged every report with 5 fields I trusted more than feelings: time, place, device, tone source, and what the person forgot first. Phones were common, but not the only source. Store speakers, apartment intercoms, smart speakers, hospital public address, a television in a waiting room, a bus stop advertising screen near State Street. That mattered because it killed the easy explanation that one phone carrier had glitched. The tone came through systems that did not share one normal route. Something had fed the same audio cue into consumer devices, public devices, and commercial announcement systems. I did not say that on air yet. I said I was seeing a pattern with audio. I told people to lower volume on unnecessary devices, turn off smart speakers, silence televisions, and avoid public spaces with announcement systems until officials clarified the problem. I knew some people would call that fear-mongering. I also knew the city had already trained everybody to obey alerts. Flash flood warning, child abduction alert, severe thunderstorm warning, evacuation advisory, missing person notice, public safety message. The sound gets your attention before your judgment catches up. That is the point of alert design. My producer, Nia, came in at 9:23 carrying a paper bag with egg sandwiches and 2 coffees. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow from a bike crash years earlier, and a habit of staring at bad information until it got uncomfortable and confessed. She was the only reason my stream looked halfway professional. She stopped inside the door and told me people were standing still on the sidewalk downstairs. Not a crowd. 3 people. 1 older man with a briefcase, 2 teenagers with backpacks, all of them facing the curb. She thought they were waiting for a rideshare until the older man asked her what building this was and then asked the same question again before she finished answering. She had heard a tone outside, too. Not from her phone, from the digital parking meter kiosk at the corner. She described it almost the same way the grocery caller did. A short, high sound and then a low, steady tone. She remembered buying coffee. She remembered the tone. She remembered the 3 people. She did not remember crossing the street. That got me to stop typing. I had her write the last thing she clearly remembered on the whiteboard. She wrote, "Oh, coffee shop, paid with card, heard tone near kiosk." Then I made her write the time. She wrote 9:26. I checked the computer clock. It was 9:27. Good enough. I handed her an index card and told her to write my name, her name, the room address, and the sentence. If I am confused, read the whiteboard before speaking. She told me that sounded ridiculous. Then she looked at the whiteboard and got quiet because she did not remember writing the first sentence. That was when the story changed for me. Until then, I had been handling it as an outside event. Something happening to callers, drivers, nurses, shoppers, people in videos. Once Nia lost a minute inside the room, the walls stopped feeling separate from the city. I unplugged the smart speaker we never used. I turned the television monitor off at the power strip. I killed the volume on both phones and put mine inside a metal mixing bowl we used for cable clutter because it was the closest thing to a shielded container I had. That was not a lab-grade solution. It was a man with limited gear trying to reduce one pathway. Nia asked whether we should leave. I said no before I had a good reason. Then I forced myself to check the premise. Staying only made sense if the room helped us do something useful. We had wired internet, battery backups, 2 laptops, hard drives, paper, working lights, and a live audience sending reports. Outside we had public speakers, traffic, phones, confused drivers, and no guarantee that stairs or streets were safer. Leaving without a plan was not courage. It was movement. A movement gets people hurt during unclear events. At 9:38, a man called from the Blue Line platform at Jackson and said riders kept boarding trains and getting off at the same stop because they forgot they had already decided to leave. He described a transit worker using a grease pencil to write destinations on people's hands. One woman had Oak Park written on her wrist and still tried to board toward O'Hare. The caller was not laughing. He sounded irritated at first, then scared when he realized he could not remember whether he had come from work or home. I asked what he had heard. He said the station announcement system popped, then played a tone, then no announcement followed. I asked him to leave the platform if he could do it safely, find a wall, sit down, and write a note. He asked what note. I told him, "Your name, your destination, and do not get on a train until you read this twice." He repeated it, then asked me why he was writing it. I heard the same question from him 3 times in less than 2 minutes. On the 3rd time, I kept my voice steady and told him he was having trouble holding recent instructions. He swore once, quietly, then the call dropped. The stream audience jumped from a few thousand to over 20,000 because fear spreads faster than corrections, and people were already clipping the calls. I hated that part. The same attention that helped us collect evidence also pushed untested claims into rooms where people had no context. Nia handled the chat and flagged reports that included exact times and locations. She stopped reading anything with aliens, vaccines, mind control towers, rapture talk, or "my cousin works for Homeland Security" in the first sentence. We needed witnesses, not drama. At 9:52, the first official statement came from the city's emergency management account. It was text only. That detail mattered. It said officials were aware of scattered reports of disorientation and urged residents to avoid driving while impaired, check on elderly neighbors, and call emergency services for immediate danger. It did not mention audio. It did not mention tones. It did not mention devices. It had the flat language of a department that knew something was wrong, but did not have permission to say what. 4 minutes later, a television station ran an on-screen banner about a possible neurological incident. The anchor began reading the city statement. Then the station's alert bed fired under her voice. Not the full emergency alert system sequence. A short tone package they used for breaking news. The anchor stopped mid-sentence, looked down at her papers, and asked someone off camera whether they were live. The co-anchor answered yes. She apologized, began again, reached the same line, then stopped and asked the same question. The station cut to commercial. Somebody in their control room had enough sense to cut audio, but the clip was already everywhere. I played it once for myself with headphones off and the computer muted, using the waveform only to mark the timing. I did not let the audio through the speakers. The anchor's memory break happened within 6 seconds of the tone package. Could be stress, could be coincidence, could be a person under bright lights losing track during a fast-moving situation. I wrote all that down because confirmation bias was standing right beside me by then, waiting for me to call every beep evidence. Then came the police dispatcher. She did not call me directly. A retired officer I knew forwarded a recording from a police radio hobby group. I did not air the raw audio because it involved an active domestic call, but I listened with the speakers off and read the transcript generated by software after it processed the file. A dispatcher had been coordinating units near Inglewood when a tone came across a linked console, possibly from an automated priority notification. She lost track of the call for about 5 minutes. During that gap, officers asked for the apartment number twice, then switched to direct communication with each other because dispatch stopped responding with useful information. Nobody died in that specific call, from what I could verify, but the transcript was ugly. The dispatcher came back confused, apologized, and asked for the nature of the emergency after units were already on scene. That was the first public safety failure I could verify from audio and timestamp. It meant the event was no longer just civilians wandering through stores. It was entering systems that depend on short-term memory, dispatch, hospitals, transit, newsrooms. Anybody who has worked a live desk knows the whole machine runs on recent information. Who called, what changed, which line is active, what instruction was given, what has not been confirmed. Strip away 5 minutes, and people do not become stupid. They become dangerous by accident. I told the audience what I could prove and what I could not. I said I had evidence of short-term memory disruption following certain audio tones across multiple settings. I said the cause was unknown. I said people should not play alert clips out loud. I said recording everything was useful, but replaying unknown audio through speakers might increase risk. I told them to use written notes, silent captions, screenshots, paper maps, and buddy checks. I repeated, do not drive unless you have no safer option. Pull over before checking devices. Turn off automatic playback. Disable smart speaker microphones and unplug them if you are able. The chat filled with people asking whether headphones were safe. I did not know. I said, I did not know. That may have been the most useful sentence I said all morning. Guessing feels productive during a crisis. It also gets people killed. I told them hearing protection seemed to help in one report, but that was not proof. I had no lab, no sample size, no controlled exposure, no measurement of frequency, no medical evaluation. I had a desk, witnesses, timestamps, and a city starting to forget its own last 10 minutes. At 10:17, Nia accused me of ignoring a caller I had already taken. She was not angry at first. She pointed at line 3 and said, "That guy again." I told her I had not answered line 3. She stared at me with that look people get when they realize the argument is not about opinion. She turned her laptop around. In our call log, line 3 had connected for 3 minutes and 11 seconds at 10:12. The note beside it was in my typing style. Husband thinks dead daughter alive. Driving to old school, North Center. Heard phone tone. I had no memory of the call. My mouth went dry. I know that is a common phrase, but I mean it literally. I reached for the water bottle and found the cap already off. I had written something on my left wrist in black marker. It said, "You lost 10:12 to 10:15. Check recording before denial." The handwriting was mine. The word denial was underlined twice. I did not remember writing it. I did not remember the caller. I did not remember taking the cap off the water. Nia and I did not speak for almost a full minute. We both read the wrist note. Then I made myself do the thing I had been telling callers to do. I stopped defending my memory. I trusted the external record. I opened the recording file, muted the speakers, and let transcription software process it. The caller's words appeared line by line. His name was Paul. His wife, Marcy, had lost repeated pieces of the morning after a phone alert. Their daughter had died 6 years earlier from leukemia. Marcy had suddenly decided she was late to pick the girl up from an elementary school near North Center. Paul had hidden the car keys. Marcy found the spare set, left the apartment, and he was calling from the passenger seat while trying to keep her from turning onto Western Avenue. The transcript showed me asking him if she had heard an audio tone. He answered yes. It came through both phones at the kitchen table. He heard it from the hallway and covered one ear because he had been grinding coffee near the machine. He remembered the tone. She did not remember the alert. She remembered their daughter alive, not hallucinating in the full sense from what he described. She did not see the child in the room. She simply lost access to the years after the death and filled the present with the last intact obligation her mind could reach. That was worse than simple forgetfulness. It meant the event could peel away context unevenly. It did not delete identity. It did not erase language. It damaged the chain between now and recent truth. A husband becomes an obstacle. A hospital form becomes meaningless. A red light becomes optional because the destination behind the wheel no longer exists in the driver's current mind. I went back on air and admitted I had lost time. I did not make it dramatic. I gave the exact window, the evidence, and the safety change. From that point on, Nia and I would speak every important instruction aloud once, write it on the board, and repeat it only after reading the board first. We would not trust a memory of having done something. We would trust logs. I told viewers to set up the same system if they could. Paper first, then phone notes only if the phone stayed silent and disconnected from alerts. I told them to label rooms, label doors, label medication, label pets, label children if necessary. That sounded harsh. It was also practical. At 10:31, the first school report came in. A teacher from Pilsen sent video of students in a hallway, not panicking, just stuck in repeated motion. Locker, classroom door, hallway, locker again. The teacher had started writing each student's name and next classroom on printer paper, taping the paper to their shirts because the students kept losing the instruction before they reached the end of the hall. And the public address system had made a tone 10 minutes earlier, then the principal's announcement failed. The school went into soft lockdown, but some staff forgot the reason and opened doors to ask other staff what was happening. The teacher sent one sentence that stayed with me. "We are not scared enough yet because everyone keeps forgetting the last reason to be scared." I did not air the student video. Children do not need to become evidence for strangers unless there is no other way. I described the pattern without showing faces. That choice cost viewers. Good. Some viewers should be lost. At 10:44, a delivery driver near the Dan Ryan called after pulling onto the shoulder. He had been moving medical supplies from a warehouse in Bedford Park to a clinic on the south side. He heard a tone through the van's infotainment system, then realized he was on the expressway with no memory of entering it. The navigation screen showed he had missed 2 exits. He did something smart. He stopped before trying to solve it while driving. He found the paper manifest and read the delivery address. Then he called me because his dispatcher kept sending voice messages that began with a tone. He had stopped playing them. He asked if he should continue the route. I told him I could not make that decision for him. Then I told him the safer logic. If he could reach the clinic without playing messages and without entering dense traffic, he might help people. If he could not hold the route in writing, he needed to park and wait. He chose to write the route on cardboard and continue on surface streets. I do not know if he made it. The official silence on audio became louder than the alerts themselves. State agencies posted text advisories. Hospital networks posted text advisories. Transit posted service disruptions with no audio announcements on some lines, which told me somebody inside had made the same connection. Then, at 10:58, the federal alert arrived on phones across the city. Nia's phone buzzed inside her bag even though she had silenced it. Mine buzzed inside the metal bowl. Across the hall, in another rented office, 3 phones screamed through the drywall. The sound was not the standard wireless emergency alert tone. It started that way, then a second layer slid in under it, steady and low, holding for too long. Nia clapped both hands over her ears and stepped backward into the desk. I grabbed the headphones from the chair and pressed them against my own ears without putting them on. The tone leaked through the walls, through the door, through the cheap window glass. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe 8. I cannot swear to it because my next clean memory is standing beside the whiteboard with a dry erase marker in my hand, reading a new line I did not remember writing. The line said, "Federal alert is contaminated or compromised. Do not replay. We lost time after tone through walls." The computer clock said 11:07. The alert had arrived at 10:58. 9 minutes were gone. Nia was sitting on the floor, holding the paper bag from breakfast. She had taken both sandwiches out and lined them up beside her shoes. She looked angry, not because of the sandwiches. She was angry because anger gives you a task when fear gives you too many. She asked what the hell happened. I pointed to the board. She read it twice. Then she crawled to her laptop and checked the stream. We had been live the whole time. For 9 minutes, the camera showed me standing near the desk, silent, eyes moving over the screens, occasionally typing. Nia moved in and out of frame, picking things up and putting them down. At one point, I looked straight into the camera and said, "Do not play the alert." Right before listening, "Do not play the alert." Then I went silent again. I did not remember saying it. The chat during those 9 minutes had become a wall of people typing variants of, "I forgot." "What was I doing?" "My dad left." "Phones did it." "Turn off sound." And "Do not call emergency services unless dying." Lines failing. Some messages repeated every few seconds from the same accounts. Some looked automated at first until I realized people were forgetting they had already asked the question. One person typed, "Where is my baby?" 11 times. Another typed, "My wife keeps packing lunch for work. She has not worked there since 2021. Another wrote, "The alert told us to stay calm, and now nobody in my apartment remembers the alert." That was when I stopped calling it a possible public health mystery on air. I called it a memory event linked to audio transmission. I still did not call it a virus except to address the word people were using. A biological virus does not enter through a tone and disrupt memory within seconds across people in different buildings. A sound can trigger a seizure in rare photosensitive or sound-sensitive cases, but this was too broad, too structured, too tied to devices and alerts. A toxin does not come through a phone speaker. Mass suggestion does not make a trained nurse write warnings on her glove before forgetting she wrote them. I said the word virus might be wrong. I said we might be dealing with a signal that behaves socially, because our devices carry it. That did not calm people. It made some of them worse. I could see it in the messages. Signal meant attack to them. Signal meant enemy. Signal meant conspiracy with a clean target. I had no target, no country, no group, no motive. The honest answer was more frightening and less satisfying. A harmful audio pattern had entered alert and announcement channels, either by design, accident, or system failure. Until we knew which one, blaming somebody would waste time. At 11:20, a small independent engineer from Urbana joined the stream by text relay only. He worked in audio systems for live venues and asked me to send him silent screenshots of waveforms from confirmed clips, not playable files. That was the right kind of request. He did not want the sound. He wanted visual structure. I sent him the grocery store clip waveform, the television station clip waveform, and my own Federal Alert recording with the audio muted. He told me the tones had similar envelopes. Short high-frequency lead, sustained lower component, slight modulation during the hold. He refused to guess the exact frequency without a safe analysis environment. Good. Serious people refuse guesses under pressure. He asked whether any victims had hearing loss. I checked the reports. One witness with ear protection had less effect. A partially deaf elderly caller in Bridgeport had seen his wife lose time after their television tone, but he did not. A drummer in Wicker Park who wore foam earplugs while practicing reported no memory gap when the apartment building intercom played the tone. That did not prove immunity. It pointed toward auditory input as the main route. Bone conduction, vibration, and low-frequency transmission remained possible. The engineer typed, "Tell people to reduce exposure, not test themselves." I put that on screen in text. At 11:32, Nia noticed we had a problem in the building. The copy shop downstairs had started using its public address speaker to tell customers that the store was closing due to emergency conditions. The owner's recorded message began with a cheerful chime. Every time it played, people inside the store seemed to reset. Through the floor, we could hear the chime faintly, then footsteps, then the same message again. The owner had probably set it to loop and then forgotten. The building itself had become a small exposure system. We could leave, or we could stop the loop. Leaving meant crossing the stairwell with possible exposure and confused people. Stopping it meant doing the same thing with a purpose. I wrote the task on 3 cards. Go downstairs, unplug copy shop speaker, do not argue, return to broadcast room. Nia wrote the same task on her forearm. We both put foam earplugs in. I added over-ear headphones from an old editing kit. We taped a note to the inside of our door. If returning confused, enter, locked door. Red board. Then we went. The hallway outside smelled of toner and old carpet. That detail matters only because it proves I remember the walk before the next gap. The elevator was open with nobody inside. A man from the tax office on the 3rd floor stood facing the wall beside the call button. He had his keys out and kept pressing the lock button on his car remote. We were nowhere near the parking lot. Nia showed him the card that said we were turning off a speaker. He read it and nodded, then asked why his car would not beep. We did not stop to solve his separate problem. The copy shop downstairs was half lit. 2 customers stood near the self-service printers with stacks of paper in their hands. One woman had printed the same shipping label at least 20 times. The owner was behind the counter, or was looking at the register screen, tapping the same button. The speaker above the laminating station made the cheerful chime. Even through earplugs and headphones, I felt the vibration enter the room. I do not remember the next 40 seconds. The recording from the small camera clipped to my shirt shows me stepping behind the counter, reaching for the wrong cable, stopping, reading my forearm, then unplugging the power strip from the wall. The speaker died. I stood there for another 10 seconds, doing nothing. Then Nia grabbed my sleeve and pulled me back toward the stairs. When we got upstairs, the note on the door worked. I tried to ask Nia why we were in the hall. She pointed to the note. I read it. The facts came back in pieces, not memory exactly, more a reconstruction from evidence. Speaker loop, copy shop, power strip, return. The room became useful again once the whiteboard told me what kind of man I was supposed to be for the next minute. That is something people misunderstand about memory. You think you are one solid line moving forward. You are not. You are a process that keeps checking itself against recent evidence. When the recent evidence stops sticking, you need external rails, paper, labels, recordings, other people. Without that, you can stand in the middle of your own life and fail to know the next correct action. At noon, Chicago sounded different through the reports. Less traffic noise, more sirens, but not a clean emergency pattern. Sirens started and stopped. Some stayed in one place too long. A listener near the Near West Side said an ambulance crew parked outside an apartment building and argued over whether they had already brought the patient down. A listener near Uptown said a fire alarm had been sounding for 20 minutes inside a senior building, and residents kept coming to the lobby, forgetting instructions, and going back upstairs. A grocery worker in Little Village said customers were trying to leave with unpaid carts because they had forgotten the checkout process, not because they were looting. Security guards kept stopping the same people, and then forgetting which ones had already been checked. The first real violence I could verify happened at a gas station near Cicero Avenue. A man forgot he had already paid, thought the clerk was stealing his card, and climbed through the window. Another customer hit him with a windshield squeegee. The clerk locked the door and called police, but the call taker kept asking for the address after the clerk repeated it. The station's pump speakers had played an advertisement chime before the incident. I did not air the video. I described the sequence and told people to stop treating confused strangers as attackers unless they were actively harming someone. That was not softness. It was accuracy. Misreading impairment as malice would start fights faster than the signal itself. Nia printed a checklist and taped copies around the room. Top line: read before action. Under it: do not play unknown audio. Confirm time. Confirm location. Check whiteboard. Speak in short instructions. Write names. Hydrate. Eat. Do not leave room without task card. We both signed the bottom. I did not remember signing it 20 minutes later, but the signature helped. It was not proof of safety. It was proof of process. At 12:17, Paul called back. The husband from North Center. I did not remember his voice, but the transcript window identified the previous call, and my wrist note still named him. He had gotten Marcy out of the car by telling her the school was closed for cleaning. That lie held for 6 minutes. Then she forgot the lie and tried to leave again. He had written their daughter's death date on paper and showed it to her. She read it, broke down, held the paper, then looked up and asked why he was making up something so cruel. He stopped showing her the paper after the third time because he realized he was making her experience the death fresh over and over. He moved the furniture against the apartment door instead. He asked me if that made him a bad husband. I told him no. I told him to stop trying to force permanent acceptance into a mind that could not hold the update. Use safety, not truth, when truth cannot stay. That was one of the hardest sentences I said that day because my whole job depends on truth being the highest tool in the room. But in that apartment, truth had become a repeated injury. Safety had to come first. I told him to remove car keys, block the stove knobs, lower all device volume, and write kind instructions that did not rely on the dead daughter. Stay inside. Paul is helping you. Drink water. Sit on the couch. He copied it. I heard him crying away from the phone while pretending not to. After that call, I changed the public guidance. Do not argue people into remembering. Do not repeat traumatic facts unless required for immediate safety. Redirect, label, remove hazards, keep voices calm, use written prompts. If someone tries to drive toward an impossible obligation, block the means, not the person, unless there is no other choice. That guidance came from one apartment and one husband making a terrible choice correctly. At 12:40, the federal government issued a second message, text only on official websites and social media accounts. It warned against replaying unknown alert audio and stated that agencies were investigating reports of acute memory disruption associated with certain broadcast tones. That was the first official admission of the audio link. It also said people should keep mobile devices on for emergency information. I challenged that on air. Not because I wanted to fight officials, but because the instruction was incomplete. Keep devices available for text information, yes. Keep audio enabled, no. Disable sound. Disable automatic video playback. Use silent alerts. Read text. Do not play clips. Do not gather around televisions in public waiting for briefings with sound on. That correction mattered because official language moves slowly and people obey the last simple sentence they heard. If the last sentence was keep phones on, many would keep volume up. I said it clearly. A device can inform you and expose you in the same minute. Separate the screen from the speaker. Separate text from sound. Separate the need to know from the reflex to listen. Then our internet stuttered. Not out. Worse. Intermittent. The stream froze, returned, froze again. Nia checked the router. Then the service status page. Major congestion. People at home streaming briefings, calling relatives, uploading clips, replaying the harmful tone because they wanted proof. Cellular networks were overloaded. Emergency lines were jammed. The infrastructure had not failed from physical damage. It was being misused under stress by millions of ordinary decisions. That is how modern systems break most of the time. Not one dramatic switch. Too many people doing understandable things at once. I switched to low bandwidth audio with captions and kept the actual output muted in the room. Nia managed the text feed. We put a banner on the stream. Read only. Do not play unknown alert audio. It felt absurd to broadcast a story about dangerous audio while asking people not to listen. But the danger did not seem to be my voice. No confirmed report linked normal speech to memory loss. The harmful pattern was specific, tonal, and repeated across alert systems. Still, I told people to use captions if they were worried. Some did. Some said my voice was the only thing keeping them organized. That made me careful. Comfort can become dependence during a crisis. Dependence fails when the source drops. At 1:03, a caller from the University of Chicago medical campus joined by text through a resident's account. The resident said emergency departments were changing intake procedures. Wristbands first. Written chief complaint before verbal history. Staff names taped to gowns. Medication orders double confirmed by 2 people reading from screens, not memory. Patients with suspected tone exposure were being placed away from televisions and public speakers. Some staff were using earplugs when moving through public areas. The resident said older patients with dementia and memory disorders were not always worse off than others because staff already knew to use written orientation boards. The people in the most danger were healthy adults who assumed their memory still worked. That observation hit the whole premise hard. We were not seeing total cognitive collapse. We were seeing a sudden forced disability in people and systems built around uninterrupted short-term recall. Places with memory aids adapted faster. Places built on verbal flow failed. Hospitals had checklists. Aircraft crews had checklists. Newsrooms had rundown sheets. Households had nothing unless they made it quickly. I pushed a household protocol for the next half hour. Pick one safe room, remove speakers, and turn off televisions. Put phones on silent and face down until needed. Write today's date, address, names of everyone present, and one rule at the top. Do not leave unless the written plan says leave. Assign one person to update the log, but require a second person to initial major changes if possible. Label medications. Label exits. Keep car keys in a marked container away from doors. Do not cook unless one person remains assigned to the stove until it is off. Keep children away from exterior doors because adults may forget why a door was locked. It sounded bossy. It was necessary. People wanted theories. I gave them procedures. A theory can wait. A pot on a stove cannot. At 1:31, Nia disappeared. I do not mean vanished in some supernatural way. I mean she was in the room. Then my attention went to a caller from Aurora reporting a warehouse alarm loop. Then Nia was not in her chair. Her laptop was open. Her coffee was cold. The door was unlocked. The task cards were still on the desk. That meant she had left without a card, or she had taken one and I could not find the missing card, or I had watched her leave and lost the memory. I checked the recording. At 1:24, she stood, looked at her phone, frowned, and walked out. No earplugs. No note. No card. She moved with purpose, which scared me more than panic would have. The phone had been face down and silent. I checked it only because the camera showed her reading it. A text preview from her brother was on the lock screen. Mom outside building can't remember address. The message showed no alert sound, no video, no clip. A human emergency had bypassed the protocol. That is how protocols fail. Not because people are dumb, because somebody they love needs help and the written rule suddenly feels less real than the person outside. I wanted to go after her. I also knew leaving the live desk without a plan could turn 2 missing people into 3 if someone else came looking. I wrote a task card. Find Nia. Check lobby and sidewalk. Ear protection. Camera on. Return in 10 minutes. If not found, come back anyway. I taped a second note to the desk for myself in case I returned broken. You went to find Nia because her mother may be outside. Do not stay outside after 10 minutes. Then I put in earplugs, headphones, clipped the small camera to my shirt and took a marker. And the stairwell had become a holding area for people who did not know whether they were going up or down. The tax office man was sitting on the landing, keys still in hand. A woman in a blazer held a folder of signed contracts and kept asking which floor had the notary. Someone had written, "Go home, phones off," on the wall in blue marker. Someone else had crossed out "Go home" and written, "Stay put." Both instructions could be right or wrong depending on who read them. That is why public guidance has to be specific. Vague advice becomes a fight between strangers. Outside, Printers Row looked controlled from a distance and wrong up close. No fires, no overturned buses, no dramatic skyline disaster, just small failures stacked together. A rideshare car sat halfway into a crosswalk while the driver read his own license plate. A woman at the corner held a dog leash with no dog attached. Two men argued beside a parking meter because both thought they had just parked the same car. A delivery robot sat against the curb repeating a customer service tone until somebody kicked it over and smashed the speaker. I did not blame him. I found Nia near the copy shop window with her mother. Her mother was in slippers and a winter coat even though the day was warm. Nia had written their address on her own palm and was trying to get her mother to read it. The older woman kept saying she had walked here from the bus stop, but she could not name the bus. Nia saw me and looked ashamed, which made me angry at the situation. Not at her. Shame wastes time during emergencies. I showed her the task card. She read it and closed her eyes for 1 second, and then she nodded and let me lead them both back inside. The camera shows the three of us stopping twice on the stairs because the tax office man asked for help, and Nia's mother tried to answer him. I do not remember the second stop. The video shows me pointing at the card, then at the door upstairs. Good. The card held. We got back in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. We made a place for Nia's mother on the floor away from the gear. Her name was Lillian. She could remember Nia at 10 years old, Nia at college graduation, Nia last Christmas, but she could not remember why she had come downtown. She had received an emergency alert on her phone, then thought Nia was still working at a cafe near this building, a job Nia had left 8 years earlier. Now she took a bus and got off when the driver announced the wrong stop twice, and then stopped announcing anything. She had walked by building numbers until one looked familiar enough. That was not luck. That was a mind using old routes after new ones failed. I did not put Lillian on air. I described the problem in general terms. People may travel toward old responsibilities, old workplaces, old schools, or dead relatives after exposure. Check doors, check vehicles, check transit cards and wallets. If someone is missing, search likely past locations, not just current routines. That one line helped more than I expected. Reports came in from families finding people at former apartments, closed churches, childhood homes, old job sites, and schools attended decades earlier. The signal did not create random behavior. It pushed people toward stored obligations when current context broke. At 2:05, the first report outside Illinois came through that I trusted. Not because out-of-state reports had been absent, but because this one arrived with documentation. A librarian in Milwaukee sent a log of patrons who lost time after a public computer notification tone. A transit worker in Detroit sent a text-only report about bus riders repeating destinations after an automated fare alert. A public defender in Indianapolis said court hearings were being delayed because defendants, witnesses, and even one clerk could not retain proceedings after the building's notification system triggered. The pattern was regional at least, maybe wider. The issue had likely entered vendor systems, alert networks, software updates, advertising servers, or all of them through a shared source none of us could see. The audio engineer from Urbana came back with a warning. He had analyzed the waveform images and believed the dangerous portion might involve a narrow modulation pattern inside a low-frequency tone layered under a normal attention sound. He said consumer speakers could reproduce enough of it to cause the effect, but the severity might change by speaker size, room acoustics, volume, and individual hearing. He emphasized that he was inferring from visuals, not playing audio. I read his caution word for word. People in chat asked for the frequency so they could block it. He refused to provide a number without certainty because a wrong notch filter would give false confidence. I respected him for that. At 2:26, a major national network aired a press briefing with the room audio muted for the first minute, captions only. Then somebody restored the audio while a federal official was already speaking. No harmful tone, just speech. The official confirmed anomalous cognitive incidents associated with auditory alerting systems. He urged state and local agencies to suspend non-essential audio alerts, disable announcement chimes where possible, and use text-based instructions. He said there was no confirmed evidence of a biological pathogen. That sentence should have helped. Instead, it caused a new problem. People heard "not biological" and assumed they did not need hospitals, masks, distance, or medical care. That was bad logic. Non-biological cause did not mean no injuries. It did not mean no patients. It did not mean people with seizures. Falls, crashes, medication errors, or psychiatric distress could be ignored. I challenged it immediately. A crisis can stop being one kind of medical emergency and still flood the medical system. The cause matters for prevention. The consequences still need care. Then the official said investigators were reviewing a recent communications infrastructure upgrade. He did not name it. The caption lagged and then corrected itself. The chat erupted around the phrase. New communications system. Memory virus. Cognitive weapon. Accident. Hack. Test. Cover-up. The official did not answer shouted questions. The feed cut to a text slate that told people to await written updates from local authorities. No tone played at the end. Small mercy. I did not have enough to explain the infrastructure upgrade, but I had enough to warn against a bad assumption. People hear upgrade and picture one switch flipped by one villain. Real systems are uglier. Phone operating systems, emergency managers, broadcasters, traffic signs, smart speakers, store announcement vendors, advertising networks, and public address controllers all overlap through contracts, software libraries, cloud dashboards, and automated content distribution. A harmful tone could enter through a shared alert package, a test file, a compromised vendor, a broken codec, or an interaction nobody predicted. Intent was not established. Harm was established. At 2:40, the city stopped using most audible public warnings. That decision saved people and created new danger at the same time. Without station announcements, transit riders missed stops. Without siren chirps, some emergency vehicles moved slower through traffic. Without public address prompts, large buildings had to rely on staff walking floor by floor with printed signs. A silent city is not automatically safe. It becomes harder to coordinate. We were not removing danger. We were choosing the danger that did less damage. A man from a building management office in River North sent photos of printed signs taped to elevator doors. Do not use elevator unless necessary. Read this fully before moving. You may be experiencing memory disruption. Return to your unit if safe. Turn off device sound. Under that, somebody had added by hand, do not take strangers' phones to check alerts. That handwritten line came from an incident in their lobby. Residents had started grabbing each other's phones because they believed the device held the answer, then exposed themselves to video clips. The answer was becoming part of the hazard. Lillian slept for 20 minutes and woke up asking why she was on the floor. Nia explained using the written card. Lillian accepted it, then forgot, then accepted it again. Each cycle got calmer because Nia stopped arguing and started presenting the card as routine. I watched that and adjusted my own tone on air. Less urgency, more repetition, short blocks of instruction, no dramatic build. Panic was not helping retention. Calm did not fix memory, but it reduced the number of extra decisions people made. At 3:02, I lost another block of time. The board says it lasted 7 minutes. The stream archive shows me answering questions in chat with text, not voice. That was strange because I prefer talking. The text responses were short and useful. Do not replay clips. Use paper. Check stove. Find missing people at old routines. Do not drive confused. Then one line appeared that I did not remember typing and still do not understand fully. The tone is not the message. The gap after the tone carries the instruction. Nia noticed it first. She asked what I meant by gap. I had no idea. We checked the archive. The sentence came after a viewer asked whether the words in alerts were causing the memory loss. My answer suggested the damaging structure was not the audible tone alone, but what followed it. Maybe a silence. Maybe a modulation hidden in the decay. I must have inferred it from something I saw in the waveform or from an engineer message. No record showed the source. That made the sentence dangerous. Useful, maybe, but unverified. I marked it in red. Hypothesis from memory-impaired period. Do not treat as fact. That is the part people skip in stories about crisis reporting. Sometimes your own best line is the one you have to distrust. especially when your brain is part of the incident. At 3:20, the emergency rooms began diverting non-critical patients. Not because hospitals were full in the usual way, though some were getting there. Because intake accuracy had degraded. Patients forgot allergies. Family members gave wrong medication lists. Staff repeated orders. Transport teams lost destination context. One hospital switched to paper tags with color blocks and large printed categories. Fall injury, exposure, cardiac history, diabetic, child, needs interpreter, cannot provide reliable recent history. That is not primitive. And that is resilient. Paper does not buzz. Paper does not play tones. Paper does not update itself into danger. A paramedic sent a message through a friend because he did not want his department identified. He said crews were writing destination hospitals on tape across the dashboard and taping patient summaries to the stretcher rail. One crew nearly transported the same patient twice because they forgot he had already been transferred inside and returned to the ambulance for equipment. Another crew found a woman wandering outside an urgent care with discharge papers from 3 hours earlier and no memory of being treated. The paramedic said nobody was trained for a city where verbal handoff could not be trusted beyond the next doorway. I read that and thought about how much of civilization is handoff. Not big speeches. Tiny transfers. The nurse tells the doctor. The driver tells dispatch. The parent tells the child. The clerk tells the next shift. The pilot reads back clearance. The judge records an order. The building manager tells tenants where to exit. Break the handoff and nothing has to explode for the system to degrade. Pro. At 3:47, a rumor spread that the tone only affected people who had heard a certain song clip online. False, based on what we had. A rumor spread that drinking salt water restored memory. False and dangerous. A rumor spread that the National Guard was shooting people who forgot orders. Unverified. And the one video attached to it was from a training exercise years earlier. And Nia handled debunks with a ruthless efficiency I loved professionally and feared personally, because she was doing it while her mother slept under the desk. She kept writing source beside claims until the chat learned to hate the word. Good. Hate the word, if it keeps you alive. At 4:06, I got the first direct message from someone claiming to work for a vendor involved in the alert upgrade. I did not trust it. The message had no name, no proof, and too much certainty. It claimed a national alert audio package had been updated to improve attention capture on modern phone speakers and smart devices. The package included psychoacoustic layering designed to cut through background noise. During a test, according to the message, it interacted with compression systems and created a pattern that disrupted working memory. That sounded plausible enough to be bait. Plausibility is not proof. I asked for documents, timestamps, version numbers, anything. The account went silent. 20 minutes later, a second source from a local radio engineering group said several stations had received guidance the previous week about a new alert audio normalization standard. That was not the same claim, but it touched the same area. I still did not report it as fact. I said there were unverified claims involving alert audio updates, and I was not naming details because bad information could cause people to target engineers, broadcasters, or public employees who had no role in the original failure. This mattered. When people feel harmed by a system, they look for a face to punish. Most faces near the system are workers with no power. At 4:31, the missing colleague problem started. Not Nia this time. Marcus, a freelance camera guy who sometimes worked with us, sent a blank text and then a location pin from Lower Wacker Drive. No words. Lower Wacker is confusing on a normal day. Multiple levels, service roads, loading docks, poor global positioning signal, echoes, bad signage, drivers who think they know where they are until they do not. During a memory event tied to phones and vehicle audio, it was a trap. I did not want to leave again. That is the honest version. I had a duty to the stream, Nia had her mother, and Marcus was an adult who might already be somewhere else. But he had sent the pin to me, not emergency services. He knew I was nearby, or he had known for 1 second and then lost the thread. I checked the camera archive to make sure I had not already spoken to him. Nothing. I called. No answer. I texted, "Do not move. Turn off sound. Write your name and location. Reply with photo, not audio." No response. Nia said I should not go. She was right. She also knew I would. That was not heroic. It was a risk calculation with guilt sitting on one side of the scale. We compromised. I would not go into Lower Wacker alone. I would call 2 nearby contacts first and ask if anyone had eyes on the area. I would give it 15 minutes. I would keep the stream running with Nia on text-only updates. If I left, I would carry written route cards and return by a fixed time. If I missed that time, she would not come after me. She hated that last part. She wrote it anyway. One contact came through, a bike courier named Andre, who knew downtown service levels better than most drivers. He was sheltering in a lobby near LaSalle Street with 3 other couriers. He agreed to check the upper entrances only, no deep search. 10 minutes later, he sent a photo of Marcus's shoulder bag beside a concrete column. No Marcus. The bag contained a camera, 2 batteries, and a printed badge from a press event we had covered last month. Andre also photographed a wall-mounted emergency speaker nearby. Someone had ripped the speaker grill off. The wires were still connected. That was enough to make the decision worse. Marcus had likely been there. The speaker may have played the tone. He may have wandered. Lower Wacker has ramps, blind corners, delivery bays, and access points into buildings. Searching it during this event could eat hours and minds. I told Andre to leave the bag and get out. He argued. I told him the rule: do not expand one missing person into 5. He sent back one word: cold. Then he left. I think he meant I was being cold. He was not wrong. He was also alive when he messaged from the lobby again. I reported Marcus missing without naming him on air. I used the case to explain search discipline. Write the missing person's full name, last known location, last known task, likely old routines, medical needs, and known safe places. Search in pairs if possible. Do not enter complex structures without route markers. Do not follow sound. Do not chase phone pings into areas you cannot navigate without memory. Leave markers showing where you checked. Return at a fixed time. People hated hearing that because they thought it meant giving up. It did not. It was how you avoid creating more missing people. At 5:08, the city issued a written shelter guidance order. Avoid non-essential travel. Disable non-critical audio alerts. Check on vulnerable neighbors by text or written note where possible. Use paper signs in multi-unit buildings. Do not call emergency services for disorientation alone unless the person is in immediate danger. Hospitals and first responders were overwhelmed. Transit service was irregular. Public schools were holding students until guardians could be verified. The order did not use the word lockdown. It did not need to. The city was narrowing movement because movement had become cognitively unsafe. The order helped people who read it. It did nothing for people already caught in loops. That became the next phase. Loops. Individuals repeating tasks. Buildings repeating announcements. Drivers circling blocks. Parents calling children again and again. Offices sending the same email because nobody remembered sending the last one. One law firm accidentally filed the same emergency motion 5 times. A pharmacy filled duplicate prescriptions until a technician wrote, "Stop duplicates, check paper log," across the counter in red marker. A church in Bronzeville rang its bell repeatedly because the volunteer forgot he had already rung it for a prayer gathering, and people began walking toward the sound. The sound of help can become a hazard if it gathers impaired people into one place. Nia and I stopped all non-essential speech in the room for 5 minutes every half hour and read the board. It felt silly. It worked. We ate because the checklist told us to eat. We drank water because the checklist told us to drink. Lillian asked the same 3 questions, and Nia answered from the card each time. The room became less a newsroom and more a small memory prosthetic made from tape, marker, and stubbornness. At 5:36, a woman from Oak Park sent the first recovery report with enough detail to use. Her husband had lost about 20 minutes after a phone alert at noon. She got him into a quiet room, removed devices, gave him written orientation, and did not argue. After about 2 hours, he began retaining new information for longer stretches. He still had gaps for the event window, but he could form fresh memory again if no new tones played. That was huge. It meant exposure might cause temporary disruption rather than permanent erasure in at least some cases. I said at least some cases 3 times. People love to turn one recovery into a cure. I would not let them. Other recovery reports followed. Some people improved after quiet and sleep. Some did not. Some had repeated exposures and got worse. Some remembered facts, but not emotions attached to them. One man knew he had been in a crash but could not remember fear, pain, or the moments before impact. Another woman remembered the alert but not the hour after. A teenager remembered everything but kept losing the current minute every time a microwave beeped, suggesting ordinary sounds could trigger panic or maybe re-exposure if the sound had similar features. We did not know. We told people to silence appliances when possible. Simple, low-cost safety. At 6:02, the sun through the narrow window changed angle and hit the brick wall outside. That is the kind of detail I usually cut from reports because it wastes time. I am keeping it here because by then the day had lost normal shape. The clock mattered. The light mattered. Written time mattered. Without them, the morning and afternoon would have blended into a set of disconnected clips. I wrote on the board, "We are in hour 10 since first logged report." Then I corrected it. Hour 10 since our first logged report, not necessarily start of event. Precision still mattered. A caller from O'Hare, using text relay through his daughter, said some travelers had been stuck near gates for hours because flight information screens changed silently and people forgot which update applied to them. Airlines stopped making gate announcements in some terminals. Then passengers missed boarding. Then staff tried handwritten boards. Then people crowded the boards and blocked corridors. A plane had returned to the gate because a crew member could not confirm whether a required checklist had been completed before pushback. That was the right call. Aviation culture understands that a completed checklist you cannot verify is not completed. I said that on air because it was one of the few examples of a system choosing delay over pride. At 6:20, the Federal Written Update finally named the mechanism category without naming a culprit. Maladaptive auditory pattern embedded in multiple alert and notification pathways. That was sterile, and probably lawyer approved. It also confirmed the broad shape. The harmful content was not rumor, not mass stress, not contaminated water, not a classic pathogen. It was audio, embedded, multiple pathways. I read the sentence twice and then translated it into plain speech. A bad sound got into systems that are supposed to get our attention, and it is interfering with short-term memory. Do not hunt for secret meanings. Reduce exposure and use written procedures. The same update warned against downloading or sharing suspected samples. Too late. People had already done it all day. Some channels were playing compilations. Some influencers were testing themselves on camera with headphones. A man with millions of followers posted a clip called, "I listened to the memory tone so you do not have to," then stopped talking halfway through and restarted his introduction 3 times. His viewers thought it was a bit until his girlfriend entered the frame and unplugged the speakers. That clip alone probably exposed thousands before platforms removed it. Curiosity became transmission. I got angry on air for the first time. Not loud, clear. I said, if you play the tone for views, you are not covering the crisis. You are distributing the hazard. If you tell people to test themselves, you are using them. If you upload suspected audio after officials warned against it, you are creating preventable injuries. I did not care if that sounded moralistic. The line between documentation and amplification had never been cleaner. Though, at 6:49, Marcus's phone sent another location pin. Same general area, but a different level near a loading entrance east of State Street. No message. Battery at 8% according to the shared location screen. Nia read the update and shook her head before I said anything. We both knew the rule. Do not chase pings into a complex environment after dark during a memory event. I sent the location to the city tip form and to Andre. asking only whether he could forward it to anyone already positioned nearby. He replied, "No one going down there." Good. Painful, but good. I added Marcus to the board under missing contacts. Full name. Last pin. Bag recovered. Do not self-search lower whacker. Seeing the instruction written by my own hand helped because my emotional brain kept trying to reopen the decision every 5 minutes. And that is another use for writing. It preserves hard choices after guilt tries to reset the debate. At 7:10, the first 12-hour frame became clear. We had logged our earliest reliable report at 8:17. In another hour, we would have 12 hours of local evidence. Not the full event, not the full country, not the truth tied up. Just 12 hours of a city learning that memory is infrastructure. I began organizing the record into a timeline while Nia handled current reports. The timeline was ugly, practical, and more useful than any monologue. 8:17, drivers freeze after phone tone near Ashland. 8:27, grocery memory gap after store speaker tone. 9:23, sidewalk disorientation after parking kiosk tone. 10:12, Paul call. Dead daughter memory regression after phone alert. 10:58, federal alert exposure, 9-minute gap in our room. Noon, first verified gas station conflict after pump advertisement tone. 12:40, official admission of audio association. 2:26, federal briefing with infrastructure language. 5:08, city shelter guidance. 6:20, maladaptive auditory pattern confirmed. I sent the timeline to 3 people outside the room and printed 2 copies. 1 copy went on the wall. 1 went into my bag. Digital records are useful until access fails, passwords fail, power fails, or your own mind fails to remember where you saved them. Paper can burn, tear, get lost, and save your life anyway. At 7:34, Lillian improved enough to retain where she was for nearly 15 minutes. Nia cried silently while pretending to organize cables. I did not mention it on air. Some things are not content. Lillian read the room card, looked at Nia, and said, "I came here because I thought you needed me." That was probably true and untrue at the same time. Old memory had guided her to the wrong version of her daughter, but she still ended up in the right room. I am not making that poetic. I am saying human memory can be damaged and still carry useful attachments. We had to protect that without trusting it blindly. At 7:52, the stream nearly ended because of a simple mistake. I clicked a viewer-submitted video without checking whether the audio was muted. The first frame showed a crowded electronics store. Before the sound played, Nia slapped the spacebar hard enough to stop playback. We both stared at the screen. The checklist had said, "Do not play unknown audio." I had read it 100 times. I still almost failed because fatigue makes familiar motions automatic. Click, play, listen. That is all it takes. I told the audience what happened. Again, not for drama, for process. Trained habits are dangerous when the environment changes. Journalists play clips. Dispatchers answer tones. Nurses respond to monitors. Drivers follow navigation prompts. Parents answer phones. The memory event was exploiting normal behavior, not stupidity. If you shame people for normal behavior, they hide mistakes. Hidden mistakes, repeat. At 8:17 in the evening, 12 hours after the Ashland video, I marked the timeline complete for the first block. The city had not ended. That is important. End-of-the-world thinking makes people sloppy because it turns every rule into a joke. Chicago was damaged, confused, partially paused, but still operating in pieces. Hospitals were adapting. Some transit staff were using signs. Families were finding missing people. Engineers were analyzing without playing the sound. Officials were late, but finally writing the right warnings. The crisis was not over. It had become a long systems problem. I spoke into the mic with the room silent around me and the monitors dimmed. I said this record covered the first 12 hours we could verify from our desk. I said the memory gaps were real, audio-linked, and dangerous. I said the word virus was useful only if people understood it as a pattern moving through communication channels, not a germ in the air. I said we did not know whether the original event was an attack, a defective alert package, a software interaction, or some combination of negligence and bad design. I said anyone claiming certainty without documents was selling comfort or rage. Then I gave the last guidance of that block. Keep devices silent. Prefer text. Do not replay suspected tones. Write plans before acting. Do not drive confused. Do not argue with impaired people about painful facts unless safety requires it. Search for missing people by old routines and likely destinations, but do not enter complex areas without markers and return times. Label medications, doors, stoves, keys, and children's safe rooms. Check on neighbors with written notes. Treat memory as something that can fail in normal people under abnormal exposure. Build around it. After I finished, I forgot I had finished. That is the truth. I looked at Nia and asked whether we had done the 12-hour summary yet. She did not answer with her memory. She pointed to the recording timer, the printed transcript, and the final line on the board. Summary completed at 8:22. Do not repeat unless new facts. I read it, felt the embarrassment rise, then let it go. Embarrassment was useless. The record held. That was the win. We stayed in that room for the next stretch because leaving after dark with Lillian half-oriented and Marcus missing made no sense. The city outside kept moving in broken, uneven ways. Sirens without chirps, buses with handwritten destination signs, apartment windows with notes taped inside the glass, people on sidewalks reading their own palms, police cars parked at angles with officers writing instructions on hoods, a downtown that had not burned, had not flooded, had not been bombed, and still could not trust the next instruction unless somebody wrote it down. I keep the full archive in 3 places now. 1 drive in my bag, 1 drive with Nia, 1 paper timeline folded into a folder with coffee stains on the corner. I do not trust my clean recollection of the day because clean recollection is exactly what the event damaged. I trust the recordings where they are safe, the transcripts where they are complete, the notes where they match timestamps, and the people who corrected me when I tried to believe my own head over the evidence. If you are hearing this later, do not treat it as a campfire story or a warning from some guy who got lucky with a microphone. Treat it as a field record from a city that learned a hard fact in public. Memory is not just personal, it is part of transportation, medicine, law, emergency response, family care, and every ordinary handoff that keeps a day from falling apart. When the signal hit, people did not turn into monsters. They became unreliable witnesses to their own lives. That was enough to hurt a city. And if a device near you plays an alert tone you do not recognize, do not be brave. Do not test yourself. Do not replay it for proof. Kill the sound, write down where you are, and read what you wrote before you move. Because the most dangerous thing I saw in those first 12 hours was not panic. It was a person standing still with a working phone in his hand, waiting for the same device that harmed him to explain what happened next.